Welcome to today's webinar, Q&A Ask the Nutritionist with Kelly Barnhill. Kelly Barnhill, MBA, CN, CCN, is the Director of the Nutrition Clinic at the Johnson Center for Child Health and Development. She is a Certified Clinical Nutritionist with over a decade of experience working with nutrition in children with autism and related disorders. At the Johnson Center, she directs a team of dietitians and nutritionists that have served over 3,000 children through this practice. In addition to her clinical practice, Kelly also serves as the Johnson Center Clinical Care Director, overseeing management and implementation of multidisciplinary care across the practices within the organization. In 2008, Kelly accepted the position of Nutrition Coordinator for the Autism Research Institute. In this role, she designs and manages curriculum and training for hundreds of nutrition practitioners each year, as well as providing direct training for thousands of parents. Kelly is a sought-after presenter, speaking at several national and international conferences each year. Her studies and work at the Johnson Center are the culmination of many years' effort and expertise, with the last several years devoting to understanding the biological underpinnings of the disorder we know as autism. Her work has raised awareness of the need for these services for children with autism and related disorders. Kelly is a graduate at the University of Texas at Austin.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We have questions that people have sent in advance of our webinar today, and questions can keep coming in throughout this. You can just type them in the question box on the side of your screen. So let's just jump right in and get started. Someone asks, we had 23andMe DNA testing done which shows gene SNPs. Do specific foods or supplements support gene mutations, and how can I find out which are the important gene SNPs related to autism and what nutrition to give our child in order to support them? This is an emerging area of research. There isn't a lot out there yet looking at use of diet or nutrition specifically based on gene SNP testing. The field is actually called nutrigenomic, and if you have a 23andMe test completed, you can enter that data on a site called metabolichealing.com. It allows you to upload your data, and then and there are several other ones as well. That data is available for your use, and it gives you information on diet and nutrition. There's no guarantee on this one because there just isn't enough research out there and enough data to base this on, unfortunately. But some families have found success with it. So that's something to try. Another family asks, should my entire family be on a specialized diet if my child who has autism is? We counsel families that we see and serve that it's easiest and most appropriate, and there are fewer infractions. If everyone in a household follows a specialized diet, it's not so hard. Some families choose to eat what they like outside of the home and keep their home gluten and casein free, for example. Others follow a strict diet to support their child who's also been placed on it. But in a sense, our suggestion is strongly that keeping any foods in the home that are prohibited or off of a child's diet is not a good idea, and we strongly suggest for families to limit food in the house to something that everyone can consume. Should I be worried about BPA or other things in Tetra Paks of coconut milk? We recommend BPA-free options, and many of those I can't recall the brands just now, but we suggest avoiding all BPA. So I would choose a brand that doesn't have BPA in it. My son has autism and hypothyroidism. Does cooking goitrogens, cruciferous foods, make it okay to eat them? Not necessarily. Honestly, we typically suggest supplemental support for a child who has a hypothyroidism diagnosis, and we tend to avoid cruciferous vegetables if possible, but if your child can eat and tolerate them and hypothyroidism is well managed, it shouldn't be an issue. My child is dairy-free and grain-free for almost 2 years, and he eats mostly organic foods. He is under the care of a naturopathic doctor. What is the optimal supplement type and quantity? Some references recommend high-dose vitamins, and some recommend regular dose. There does not seem to be a consensus on what to give. When he seems better or worse, it is almost impossible to tell why. Right now, we are faced with up to 15 capsules a day and would like to give fewer if megadoses are not really required. I think this is a great question because it speaks to really individualized care, and that there aren't any right answers. Some kids respond beautifully to high therapeutic doses of certain things like magnesium and B6, and some don't and have a negative reaction to it. For us, and I feel like this speaks to all of us, not just our children that we serve, but the basics are really important. So a good quality basic multivitamin, which we use several different brands. Kirkman makes one, Claire Labs makes one that are both very good. They also have, in addition to RDA, they have a little bit of extra B6 and B12, but not wildly loaded doses. That might be a good start. We also strongly suggest essential fatty acids for everyone that we see. We remediate any deficiencies in things like vitamin D. And then we look at digestive support. So if a child needs probiotics or digestive enzymes, for example, those tend to be the basics that all of us can benefit from, and then choosing those therapeutic level doses need to be done with a practitioner. And if the practitioner that you are seeing has recommended those based on testing of your child, then I would report these, track the data so that you're getting really clear information on what's going on with your child, and report that back to your practitioner for specific help in addressing and tweaking those supplements. My son has normal serum levels of calcium and magnesium. However, his hair analysis has high calcium. What does this mean? I wish I could tell you. I don't interpret hair analysis testing. Unfortunately, it's not unusual. You would want normal serum levels, and those values really are not a function of intake, but rather a function of homeostasis in the body. But I can't speak to your hair analysis question, I'm sorry. What is the right amount of probiotics to give a 4-year-old? Another great question, because it really speaks to the one that I mentioned earlier, and that is all of these things need to be determined on an individual basis, and there are lots of things that would go into the choice of which probiotic strain or strains to use and how much, because one 4-year-old is not the next 4-year-old is not the next 4-year-old, and a tiny amount for one child might be absolutely appropriate, and a dose that's far greater than a labeled dose when used by a practitioner would be appropriate for another. So that's an individual treatment question, unfortunately, that a practitioner needs to help you with. Is IgG food allergy testing reliable? Great question. More and more research is coming out that does in fact link IgG food intolerance, delayed allergy response, different people like to call it different things, that link certain IgG tests to certain outcomes. So there's not a lot of research there, but there is some, and when families, the data that we glean from an IgG food panel can be very helpful because it can help us choose specific foods if a child is highly responsive, or it can tell us more about the child's immune response if the child is responsive on some level to just about everything on the panel. And that gives us a clue into how to help best serve from an immunological perspective that child. So on an individualized basis, depending on how the patient presents, it can provide useful and appropriate information. My child is 5 years old and has been grain and dairy free for almost 2 years. Is gluten-free sufficient? If my child could have gluten-free grains, his diet would be more varied. Sometimes he does not seem to eat enough. I think that a grain-free and dairy-free diet that looks like a paleo approach, for example, or close to a GAPS or an SCD approach is appropriate for some children, particularly those who have significant GI symptoms. I think it has to be a very well-managed diet with professional input, if at all possible, because you want to avoid, you want to make sure that your proteins, carbohydrates, and fats are balanced, and taking out, you know, a key component of our carbohydrate intake by taking away grains. We need to balance that with other things like fruits and vegetables. So if you feel like your child isn't eating enough, I think it's a great idea to track that intake just for a couple of days and then attempt to figure out the calorie breakdown. There are several free apps online that allow you to input everything that you're eating on a daily basis and then get information back in addition to total caloric content and also proteins, carbs, and fats if you're worried. Or seek out someone to help in that approach. I think that in making the choice to add gluten back in, I would do it in a very controlled circumstance so that, add grains other than gluten back in. I would do it in a very controlled circumstance so that you manage and take data on that decision so that you really see, okay, 3 days down the line, behaviors haven't changed, sleep hasn't changed, there's no GI pain, things like that. I would, track it for a couple of weeks, because sometimes when we add foods back into a child's diet like this, we think, oh, everything's great, and then we realize 2 or 3 or even 4 weeks down the line, we made this change, and now we have we have this slide in behavior, or we have wakeful nights. And then when you remove it, you realize, oh yeah, we really did make a difference when we kept all grains out of his diet. So I hope that helps a little bit. I have an 8-year-old son who is gluten, dye, and soy-free. He's about to be casein-free. All of his supplements go into his morning shakes, and I think we are reaching maximum density as to the supplements going into. What do you recommend? Bite the bullet and begin laying down the law by giving supplements in a dropper or with a little juice? That's a great question, and I think you can access information on giving supplements successfully on the autism.com website. You can also access that in a blog post on our website, johnson-center.org. We work with families to help the child accept more supplements, but if you feel like your son is at a place where he can cooperate and will cooperate, I think it's always best you could even try capsule or pill swallowing if you'd like, and that way he can be in charge of it, and you're not putting everything into a smoothie every morning. What, if any, proven studies have been done regarding red dye and other dyes with relation to ADHD and ASD? There are a number of studies out there now. You can find them, many on feingold.org. I'm sure you might be familiar with the Feingold diet, which avoids all dyes and other additives and preservatives. There's a tab on that website that has a link to research studies. You can also find information on the foodmatters.org website, which would have links to specific research studies in this area. And the Environmental Working Group has a website called healthychild.org, and they have links there and further information that is backed up by research and data on red dyes and others, specifically with ADHD behavior. I have heard about omega-3 being deficient in children who have ADHD or autism. Can you discuss those findings? And can you speak to if that is true or not, and what the best way is to help raise those levels? My children like shrimp and tuna, but that's about it. So very short story, our diets in the United States now are largely deficient. For all of us, we're largely deficient in omega-3s because we simply don't access foods on a regular basis that are rich in omega-3s. So we usually and typically recommend an essential fat supplement for the children that we serve. Starting at the labeled dose on a quality brand. You need to be careful on the brands that you choose because they can be contaminated with other things from the ocean. They can also be cross-contaminated in processing. They can be oxidized. So you really need to choose a reputable brand when you look at essential fatty acids and specifically omega-3s. We like Nordic Naturals as one brand that's readily available at a standard grocer at this point, and using their products, which are balanced EPA, DHA products for adults in children at the labeled dose is entirely appropriate and a good place to start to raise those levels. Someone asks, I was wondering how long can we use natural medicines like vitamins or supplements or something similar? As long as you are working with a practitioner and you're using things wisely under the direction of a professional, you can use them indefinitely. Truly, our dietary intake and our diets are so poor that many practitioners see supplementation as the only way to meet our minimum standards of dietary intake. So as long as you're choosing good quality products and using them with the help of someone guiding you, or at least working with and letting your pediatrician know that you are using some supplements and that someone's well aware of them, I think that you're fine. Would you recommend using raw goat milk? I have heard some parents that give raw milk have seen improvements in the digestive system since the enzymes are present and has not been diminished in the pasteurization process. Does raw milk have more nutrition? We do not recommend raw goat milk for our clients, but I serve many families who choose to consume both raw goat milk and also raw cow's milk. I think the data does show that enzymes are more active. The nutrition, it is a more nutritious form of milk. It has not been homogenized or pasteurized. But we cannot, and I do not recommend, but I support families who do use it and have access to it because it is a very, it's a controlled product in many states. It's not something that families readily have access to, but if they have access to a good quality provider who they trust, many families choose to go that route. We have not tested for allergens and we have no indications of celiac disease. Should all children with autism be tested? I heard it's a lot about gut to brain linked in autism. We strongly recommend having a full GI panel completed for kids that we work with as a component of understanding more care. I think that more and more practitioners are moving in that direction and they understand the nuances of the GI system and neurology and behavior. There are a number of exceptional books out there that speak to this now. And autism in particular is clearly one of the first areas of interest there. So I think that it doesn't necessarily have to be celiac disease, but there are many issues that could be driving behavior that are related to the GI tract. And in working with our clients, we do a full GI evaluation. I work with a young man whose nutrition test showed he was low in all nutrients but high in folic acid. Would taking a multivitamin that had folic acid in it be detrimental? That depends. I would need to know more about what type of folic acid testing that was. It could be that he can't typically, and this happens depending on methylation ability, convert, if it was blood work, there could be an inability to easily convert folic acid into a usable form, and that could be the reason for its high level, and supporting a patient like that with an active form of folic acid would be the route that most practitioners would use in addition to a multivitamin. Could you please give the websites again regarding dyes, etc.? I'm sorry, it was Feingold, Feingold, for Dr. Sidney Feingold. So Feingold.org, foodmatters.org, and healthychild.org. My son is scheduled for a repeat MMR shot. I'm nervous since his ASD symptoms started after his first dose. Is there a way to get a shot broken up, like a measles shot, a rubella shot, and mumps all separate? Unfortunately, the MMR is available only as the MMR. It is not available in single doses for each component of it. Is there any test to check whether my kid is getting all nutrition? There are a number of tests that can do that. Functional practitioners, integrative practitioners can order tests that will allow you to fully understand your child's what's going in. So when we see a child, we look at what's going in as well as how the child is utilizing that. So it could be that your child has a great diet, but if he has an inability to digest and absorb those nutrients, it's not helping. So there are a number of different blood tests. There are some physicians who use urine tests that can provide some useful information regarding nutritional status. Different practitioners use different ones. What is the best brand name for a vitamin supplement? So I think, it depends. If we're talking about a high-quality multivitamin that that might benefit a child with autism as foundational care, choosing something from Kirkman Labs could be appropriate. They have a product called Nuthera, Nuthera. They specialize in serving those in the autism community, and so they pay great attention to the research and adjust their products and create them accordingly. So that might be a good foundational step. Another choice could be a product by Claire Labs. It's Klaire, called Vita Spectrum, which again is a pretty basic foundational component of care. It is a complex multivitamin that was created particularly for children on the spectrum. That product needs to be ordered by a practitioner or through a practitioner, but the Kirkman product can be purchased directly to the consumer. My child has a limited diet of rice and meat and doesn't like to try new foods. He is 11 and everything else is gross, and he is lactose intolerant. He has serious problems with constipation. How do I introduce new foods that help with constipation? I think that there are several different things going on here, and most importantly, if the constipation is an ongoing concern, I would strongly suggest looking at adding more fiber to his diet, and that can be done through vegetables and fruits. But if you're fighting a battle with getting him to try new foods, it's probably best to address that first, address the constipation first, and see that introducing foods as a separate and distinct issue. So I would say adding a fiber supplement. Heather's Tummy Fiber is a good one. Another way to go would be aloe vera water, which is an insoluble fiber that's very good. Both of those are available at most drugstores and many grocery stores as well, and they might be a place to start. The labeled dose would be the RDA for fiber, which you can find on either of those packages. In terms of introducing new foods, We take a behavioral approach. We have a behavioral team here of ABA specialists who help with kids we call picky eaters all the way to kids who are problem eaters. And I think that for children who eat fewer than 10 foods, you may want to think about working with a professional to broaden the diet, and I would be happy to share with you some referral and resource information if you email us, because that way you can have a plan created by a professional to reinforce good behavior, so trying new foods, and expand the diet logically that way. Are fish oil and cod liver oil capsules as effective as a liquid version? My child will swallow capsules but has to be forced to take liquid and will vomit. Emotionally, it's very hard. We use Nordic Naturals. Is cod liver oil or fish oil the better option? Great questions. I think it's just fine if your child will take capsules. I would not fight the liquid battle. If you have liquid that you want to try, I mean, I'm assuming that you've done this, but you can refrigerate it, and if it's very cold, the noxious taste that is offensive to many children can be, kind of knocked down a bit if it's been refrigerated and is very cold. But cod liver oil and fish oil are really used for two different purposes. They both have essential fats, but a fish oil, an EPA DHA oil, provides lots and lots of omega-3s, and that's the reason that we use that. A cod liver oil comes just from the liver, and therefore it's highly concentrated vitamin A and vitamin D, and less so omega-3s. So a practitioner would really be able to tell you by looking at test results which would be most effective for your child, but if you're looking to support with omega-3s, the fish oil is the way to go. If your child is deficient in vitamin D or less likely vitamin A, then you would go with cod liver oil. It's also used, many families feel like it helps with kids with eczema if they have additional A and D in the body. You have to be careful with that though, because those are both fat-soluble vitamins that can, you can overload someone if you aren't careful with dosing. So be cautious with that and go for a fish oil for essential fatty acids. My son has autism. Please help us name the best lab for GI system testing. There are a number of different labs out there, honestly, and depending on the child's presentation, a practitioner may choose one path or another. So I really can't tell you the best lab. I can tell you that a workup should look at if your child has GI concerns, you should look at blood levels of certain factors that may be elevated for children with autism or children with GI problems. You should look at a stool sample, which preferably is taken over multiple days and processed carefully so that the specimen isn't compromised and can be fully evaluated for a range of things from inflammatory markers to ova and parasites. Another question we have is, there are so many probiotics in the market, which one has shown the best results for children with autism? There are a few on the market that have been researched in children with autism, but what we're learning about with probiotics in general across the population and the uses that are indicated there is that strain-specific treatment is the appropriate way to go. So the microbiome in the small intestine is different than the microbiome in the large intestine, with multiple different strains of concerns with the microbiome in the mouth is different than other components of the GI tract, and so depending on what we're treating, that determines the probiotic that you use. There are a number of quality probiotics out there that practitioners use with clients, particularly those with autism, and I think that it has to be an individualized case-by-case basis. Just choose something that is well regarded and recommended by your professional. Pulling something off the shelf at the grocers, you don't know what's in the bottle because the supplement industry is largely unregulated. You have to trust the source, and choosing a professional to work with who can speak for a product they've used for years would be the way to go. What are the best tests a conventional pediatrician can order to help understand what my child needs nutritionally? Great question. I think that a pediatric workup, if your pediatrician would be comfortable ordering testing for you, could include vitamin D levels. The American Academy of Pediatrics suggests vitamin D testing, but most pediatricians don't do this. Vitamin D testing is important because it plays a huge role in the immune system, and that's a simple test that can be done at any lab. Getting a basic CBC, a blood count, and a metabolic panel could be nice, and then getting a full iron panel as well as a ferritin level would be very helpful to you and put you on a path towards getting some nutritional information to help serve your child well. What supplements do you recommend for a nonverbal 3-year-old boy with autism who is scratching and biting a lot lately? What sort of calming supplements could be used? Great question. I think from a foundational perspective and looking at it through without full information and understanding the client, the thing that comes to mind most would be use of magnesium. There is a product called Natural Calm, which is a magnesium citrate product, and it's for the purpose of calming. And we suggest for magnesium supplementation, that's a place to start, typically at bedtime, so that it helps relax and calm the child to sleep through the night. We also suggest Epsom salt baths. That can be very calming and soothing, and there are also magnesium sulfate creams, so Epsom salt cream, and there's a magnesium oil that you can rub on your child's feet. All of those avenues of getting magnesium in could be helpful in calming your child. What amount of EPA DHA should be given to a 5-year-old? Labeled dose for Nordic Naturals would be an appropriate dose to start with. If you work with a practitioner, they likely could recommend that you go higher than that because there is research out there looking at oils, and you can find all the research on the Nordic Naturals website. They actually have every research study out there linked, and it looks at behavior, it looks at attention, and those studies can give you information on it can help you ask questions of any professional that you're working with to choose the best dose for your child. But without professional advice, I would just say beginning with the labeled dose would be entirely appropriate. My son is 13 years old and he weighs 206 pounds. I am very worried. He will only eat fast food and gets very angry when I make homemade meals. His pickiness is worrying me. What should we do? I feel like this, again, would be a way to involve and get professional guidance and support. If your child is in a public school, this can be addressed in his IEP. You can call an ARD and ask for help in addressing and expanding his diet because it is something that will affect his behavior, his attention in the school. And you can access resources that way. You could look for a behavioral specialist who works with children with autism and build a behavioral plan and an intervention plan to introduce new foods as well. Many times that intervention is covered by medical insurance. Sometimes it's not. And if you'd like referrals and resources in your area, I'm happy to provide those to you via email. What are the benefits of yogurt and not including milk and dairy products in the diet? So two separate questions. Yogurt really, whether it's dairy or non-dairy, the benefit of including yogurt in a diet is that it's rich, the fermentation creates rich probiotic strains. So whatever probiotic base is used in the yogurt is what will grow and then can be consumed. The downsides of commercial yogurt are that many of those cultures are gone by the time that they're purchased, and there is also a lot of sugar in the containers. So choosing yogurt that is sugar-free and really just made from the source would be imperative. There are lots of coconut milk yogurts, almond milk yogurts out there now that are really great and a great way to get probiotic strains in. And what is the benefit of not including milk or dairy products in the diet? Well, for each child it's individual, but there is research out there that suggests that milk and dairy products can be inflammatory. People can be highly responsive to them, and when we remove them from a diet, their symptoms improve. Also, many of the children that we work with come in drinking a lot of fluid milk, so in excess of 8 ounces a day, really, for a child who's over the age of 2 is a lot, and that means that their caloric intake is coming solely from that source, and they may be uninterested in trying other foods and broadening their diet to get other nutrition because they're consuming so much fluid milk. So we often tell families, let's just get rid of that fluid milk. There's no need for it. We can get those nutrients elsewhere and see if that helps on any of those levels, from an inflammatory perspective, from a symptom perspective, from a broadening the diet perspective. What inflammation control can be used? That's a great question. There are, assuming that there's inflammation in the body, we really need to document first through a clinical workup, but once we know what we're dealing with, there are a number of different medical nutritional paths available depending on what we're specifically targeting that can be used to calm things down in the body and support the child. My daughter struggles taking medications. Is there any lab or a website resource that alters medications for children like this? It would be great to have meds as gummy bears, for instance. I strongly suggest that you go have a conversation with a local compounding pharmacy, and they can likely do something for you. We have been successful in getting chewables made for meds. We have been successful in getting wafers made and getting liquids that kids will tolerate that are also healthy. So if you have a local compounding pharmacy, go in and speak with that pharmacist, and that's where you'll find your help, I think. The gluten-free diet has seemed to help my autistic child of 6 years with behaviors and language. Dad and I have been thinking of a plant-based diet for our own benefit. I hesitate to remove dairy from my child's diet, although they say you can get your vitamin D with other means. Do you have any suggestions? Is it okay for a child to be on a plant-based diet? It's absolutely okay for a child to be on a plant-based diet. I think the things that you would want to think about are vitamin D, as you mentioned, and you can certainly get that from other avenues. You can also just take a vitamin D supplement, a standalone supplement, or you can choose a multivitamin that would also contain some other things that may be lacking in a plant-based diet, such as B12. And those things, as long as you're getting a multivitamin in, a plant-based diet seems to be the way that we all should be going. It's the common denominator across a number of different approaches, both in health and disease. And so I feel like absolutely it can be done, and it can be done safely. Just get as much information and a head start available before you, and make sure that you get that vitamin in consistently before you remove things from the diet, because you don't want to take things away and then be stuck with not being able to get the supportive nutrition in that you need. Can you provide your email address so we can get a referral? Yes, you can reach us at info@johnson-center.org. Does the Johnson Center work with international clients? Yes, we do. You can reach us through that email that I just gave you, and I will put everything on the screen too in just a bit. Is kefir okay to have if your child is lactose intolerant? I would steer clear of anything other than, and really I would eliminate milk products, not just milk sugars, for that purpose, and then reintroduce as you see fit, and then gauge for responsiveness. So I would avoid all and then trial things, and that will tell you if it's something that your child can tolerate or not. My granddaughter will only eat raw carrots, broccoli, peanut butter, eggs, meat, and pasta, and bread. She has a limited list of what she eats. Fruit is a problem. She eats a small amount. She gets omega-3s, a vitamin D3, and she's healthy. She hardly ever gets sick, but she is just so fussy. Understand. That, honestly, I see the list and I know it feels very limited, but those are exceptional. That's a great supplementation support for the holes that could be in that diet. The one thing I would suggest, if you want to, in addition to creating a plan to introduce foods, you could also add a whole food-based supplement. So a good quality whole food, which is a plant-based fruit and vegetable supplement, would allow your child, your granddaughter, access to all the phytonutrients that we get through our fruits and vegetables that are not really replicated in a multivitamin. And that would broaden exposure to other nutrients that we haven't even really identified yet from a scientific perspective. They're just solely in the diet. I'm not sure who to choose as far as a holistic or a other doctor. How do you make those choices? We strongly recommend, and at ARI, families ask this question every day, and we suggest that families talk to support groups to get some of those questions answered. So there are a number of different quality support groups, and the parents in those groups have experience working with a variety of different practitioners. Understand that what might be a great fit for one family may not be for you, but that's a place to start doing your homework and choosing the right resource to work with your child, I think. I am new to an autism diagnosis. What type of doctor do we take my twins to that can point me toward the right tests that have been mentioned? Our pediatrician has only given us referrals for OT and speech, but no other tests have been done. Should I seek out a more specialized doctor? So we really believe in nutrition as foundational care, and any functional or integrative practitioner who has a practice that serves children with autism can direct you in choosing appropriate tests and also treatment for your child, because our belief is making your child as healthy as possible through evaluation and treatment then allows your child to learn and grow, and it improves their quality of life. So I would recommend looking at a local functional or integrative medicine specialist. Also, you can check, in addition to those parent groups that I mentioned, you can also look at the Institute for Functional Medicine. I believe their website is ifm.org, and they have a list of certified practitioners who have gone through extensive training in just this type of care and then you can have access to and contact them to ask if they work specifically with pediatric clients and also those with autism. What tests can be done to determine if methylcobalamin is being absorbed? There are a couple of different tests out there. Most practitioners use either a urine test that looks at organic acids in the urine that can speak to that. There are also blood tests that do that, and they all need to be ordered by a practitioner who, as I mentioned, is a functional specialist who would then know how to interpret them and give you the information that you need. These are not typically tests that a pediatrician would order because they're complex and need interpretation by someone who does this regularly. I've heard differing thoughts on whether a gluten-free diet would help someone on the spectrum, especially someone with Asperger's. With the gut-brain connection, it seems plausible that a gluten-free diet can help. What are your thoughts? I believe from both a research perspective and also a clinical experience perspective that trialing a gluten-free diet can be beneficial for anyone. We see many different children and adults here. And if that is if it's indicated in any way through data that we have, that's certainly something that we trial. We also have families who simply want to try a gluten-free diet. And as long as that's managed well and the nutrients that are taken out through removing all the gluten are added back in through other resources, I strongly feel that it's worth attempting to see if it can improve quality of life for any of us. I feel like being able to take data across that is important, again, so be prepared to just track everything: sleep, focus, attention, behavior. While you do that, typically we ask families to commit to a 4-month gluten-free trial if they're going to do one, because often any antibodies to gluten can be present in the body for months after ingestion. Many families don't feel that it makes a difference and they choose to add gluten back into the diet. And then a few days after they've done that, they realize, oh, it really did make a difference and there is a change here. So I would encourage you to work with someone to create the appropriate approach for your family member. Because I feel like it's a very healthy diet, and it's not. And now it's a much different issue to tackle to do a gluten-free diet than it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. There are many, many resources out there and high-quality foods available for anyone attempting a gluten-free diet. My son is 25. He has been diagnosed with Aspergers and ADHD, but also treated for a mood disorder and depression. He likely has leaky gut, and he does have candida issues. He won't participate with a gluten-free or any strict diet. Is there anything he can do or take to address these issues? Yes, there are many things. It would be nice if a local practitioner could help you gain some more data to drive any intervention and treatment choices, because that, if you're picking a very, you want to make sure you choose the right thing that will have the most impact, I guess, and getting more data to specifically target something would be appropriate there. Without that, I would say to you, thinking about things like gastrointestinal support, so probiotics and digestive enzymes could be beneficial, and then treatment for those issues that you suggest he has, such as leaky gut and candida, that can be dealt with a knowledgeable practitioner as well. Does apple cider vinegar help absorption of vitamins? It can help with absorption through improving digestion and absorption function, I guess. So primarily it works to support the stomach and the small intestine, and through that it can help through healing their absorption of vitamins. So it's not an issue of taking a vitamin with the apple cider vinegar, it's more an issue of long-term health for the GI tract that will then allow vitamins to be better absorbed. If you remove gluten from your child's diet, are there any supplements or foods that you should substitute? The keys with removing gluten from the diet are, number one, most grain products in the United States are fortified. And so our cereals, our breads, they're all fortified with vitamins that are not added into gluten-free products. So many gluten-free products that are on the shelves are rice flour based, but they don't have the nutrient content that is found in a traditional loaf of bread, for example, or a traditional cereal. So looking at a broad spectrum multivitamin that will replace those nutrients that are in the food the child is currently eating, that's one thing that we look at. Okay, what is the child eating now? And then make sure that we can replace that through either another dietary source or a vitamin. And the other thing that you want to think about that sometimes we don't is fiber, because we want to keep the fiber content up as well, and the fiber in some gluten-free foods is not as it's not there as it is in gluten-filled foods, and that creates problems in itself because you have a high sugar carbohydrate going into the body without the fiber to help carry it through, which can kind of alter and change the GI tract on its own, when what you're trying to do by removing the gluten is improve GI health. You can exacerbate it if you're adding in a rice flour based product that isn't fiber dense as well. So you just need to be careful about making sure daily fiber gets in. The next question says, speaking of support groups, I was at one and a mom told me not to waste my time with doctors, with DAN doctors and supplements because they're not evidence-based like ABA is. She said a DAN doctor made her son take expensive tests and supplements, and since our resources are limited, to go with evidence-based only. What is your opinion on that? I can understand how that would be discouraging information. We fully believe in ABA. And my job and my role from a health perspective is that my job is to help your child be as healthy as possible so he can participate in his life, improve his quality of life, and learn from his ABA intervention. And I believe that there are integrative and functional medicine practitioners out there who understand the nuances of this very well, and there is evidence out there looking at this. It's emerging, it's not solid, but there are a number of studies out there that look at a variety of different interventions that a functional medicine specialist or an integrative specialist would call standard of care. So I would strongly encourage you, I know every family is different, but I would strongly encourage you to find a practitioner that you trust, who you could work with to evaluate your child. There are resources out there for families with limited funding. That there are grants that are available. There are a number of different, we have family support grants that are helpful for clients who we see here. There's ACT. Today has a grant program every year that helps with supplement costs as well as testing and practitioner costs. So I would strongly encourage you to do that and work with someone that you trust. And I would try looking through ifm.org to see if you can find someone local who might be a good fit. Thank you for taking the time to talk about special diets to help in healing. I have a recovered son and diet was key for that. It took me 2 years. The reality is the diet needs to be done correctly in order to work. Yes, I agree. It's really important to, I think that We need to understand that a professional eye in creating a plan is necessary, because you invest so much time and effort and resources into an approach that may or may not be successful because one piece of it has been overlooked. So I strongly encourage you to seek out professional guidance when you start a diet or a supplement, so that you get the most from that experience, and you don't try it and then think it doesn't work, when if it could have been tweaked just a bit with some guidance, it would have been successful. I have read that rice is high in arsenic. If a child is gluten-free, rice is often a common grain, but I'm worried about contamination. Yes, rice can be high in arsenic, and there are several brands out there on the market that are organic, that will disclose testing either on their website or on their packaging, and I would go that route. It can be. There are. I don't think it's something to be overly and excessively worried about, but making good choices through choosing the appropriate ones. And I'm thinking about standing in front of the shelf at Whole Foods right now, and I can't think of the brands that I can tell you, but I know that some of them mark their product to address this very concern. So it seems like we may be out of time. Thank you so much. If we didn't get to your question, because I know there are a number of them here that I have not gotten to, please feel free to email us at info@johnson-center.org with that question again, or if you have additional questions, and I'll make sure that we get answers to your questions as soon as possible. Thank you so much.